It's 10th of November 2016. We're speaking to Christine Ward and Cheryl Cook, who are both sisters and have lived in the village all their lives.
Right, we're the two left remaining daughters of the Mullinex family. We had an older sister named Janet who died a few years ago, who was also prominent in the village at some point. We've trudged along in Silverdale along with all the others. We love it to bits, and we thought we'd just talk about our lives as kids, really, in the village.
I'm Christine, and I've never moved out of the village. I was born and bred in Church Street and moved off Ashbourne Drive about 46 years ago. I'm the only sibling that actually stayed in the village. Mum and Dad, they were the village butchers, and Mum was originally a midwife on the village and then became the district nurse. Janet, as Cheryl has just said, passed away a few years ago. She was a teacher at Silverdale County Primary School, and Cheryl went on to be a nurse and lives in Newcastle now.
Yeah, so we haven't moved far, and we're always back. Always back. I've been thinking about moving out recently, and my daughter's pointed out to me that there's no point because you'll always be travelling back every day, which is quite true really when I think about it. But I don't know whether you want to talk about you came before me,
yeah.
So I'm thinking you ought to talk about your
I was
bit.
the middle daughter, and probably remember little bits of the war that Cheryl doesn't. I remember the sirens and waking up in the night and finding I was there on my own in bed and terrified and being brought downstairs. And but that was more or less all I remember, having to get under the dining room table if the sirens went in the day. And also we had Brenda, an evacuee from London at the time. She was a bit older than us and she was with us for a few years. Her sisters were with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas next door to us. And the brother was further up the road with the family.
I didn't know she got brothers and sisters.
Yes, she had Ira and Julie. They lived with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. And poor little Julie, she was the youngest, and she had a glass eye. And I know as children we used to go round to see the performance of putting the eye in and taking it out at night.
As children would.
And the brother John, he lived about four doors higher with a family called Amphlett. I think they were all very comfortable with us, but they all naturally had to go back to London when the war was over. A lot of my childhood I loved spending over the Jollies, which was next to Redfern's farm, and there was quite a few of us used to go over the railway line and play over in the Jollies, and we loved that. It was really wonderful life. And
What was the Jollies? Was it just open ground? Or
it was open ground, but it was spoil heaps from the pit.
Grassed over. We thought it
and there was the railway line ran right behind our house, and then there was a brook, and then there were little mounds, and we used to build houses with mud and dens. Yeah, that was it. Or what do you call it when you block a brook off?
Dam
in the brooks, and paddling in this water. And I often wonder, I had scarlet fever at 6, and I have to wonder if getting in this water or different things, playing in these spoil heaps, may have had something to do with, I don't know, but there was an epidemic at the time anyway. But it was lovely. I always only ever remember, as children do, summer. It was always sunny, and we could play over there. And there was, further down the road, there was a sewer that went under the Jollies. not too long.
It might have been a water drain.
Yeah, it
Chris,
could have been
not
a
so much
water
a sewer,
drain.
as a water drain
Yeah,
system.
and all the kids dared one another to go through this water drain. And I went one day, absolutely terrified, but I went one day and the boys were kidding me up as next door's dog was dead in there. Jip the dog.
But you didn't come across it in your travels.
Well, I don't remember seeing much at all. I couldn't wait to get out of it. Yeah, and I do remember when Cheryl was a baby, in like a Moses basket, on a Sunday afternoon, if it was beautiful, Mum and Dad taking us over, and Janet, and we had picnic, but more in the Redfern's farmer's field.
Rather than in a...
Than
in
the
the
spoil
slag
heaps. It was
That was
lovely.
good.
Carrying all the food and this Moses basket across there, and the sun was shining, and it's one of those things that stays in your mind, really. Yeah, it's lovely.
I'm Cheryl Cook, Mullinex, and I'm very much, or always have thought that I was very much the afterthought that came along, because Janet was nearly 10 years older than me, and Chris is 7, and I came along after the war. We had a brother between me and Chris, who had died unfortunately at about 16 months old of
Well, he had measles. We'd all had measles, and then he got pneumonia and passed on.
I always went through life thinking that I should have been the boy that they'd lost, but I was never meant to feel like that. But I've never forgiven my mum and dad for the name they gave me, because in those days, in 1947, Mum had, on her travels as a district nurse, had heard of someone who'd had a baby in Nutton and had called her Cheryl. And up to then I was Jennifer at that point, before I was born. And Mum decided that Cheryl was a really different name. And I've always felt embarrassed to have it ever since. I felt as if I was the Kylie of the 40s. And I've had to carry this tag ever since. And I've never forgiven her for it. So I'm actually Cheryl Jennifer. But before I was born, I was going to be Jennifer Mary. But I was always the one that... I was always the damn nuisance. Because they'd got their friends, they got their groups, their gangs, and I was sent out to be looked after by them as kids. And they always resented it. Everybody resented having Cheryl along. And it was really fun. I mean, they didn't do anything to me, but I always knew I was the damn nuisance. And that's how we had to grow up, with me in tow. But they did show me a life that I would never have probably seen otherwise. And the concerts we had in Wilkinson's shed and things like that, where somebody weed over the top of the curtains at the audience. One of the lads decided to wee over the curtains at the audience. And I don't know, life, as Chris said, was just sunny, always. We had a really happy life. When I was very small, one of the big adventures I always remember was Sunday afternoon, because Dad would have a day off, being the butcher. He was closed on a Sunday. And so every so often we had to empty the cellar of water. Because we lived next door to the railway line and then the brook, somehow it seeped into our cellar. And every so often we had to have the big bail out. And of course it had to be done through my mum's posh middle room. And all the furniture had to be stacked carefully to one side, and then we'd have newspapers and God knows what all the way through. And then up and down the cellar steps with buckets they'd go, one after another, and then pouring it in the grid outside the back door. Can you remember?
I can, yes.
And Mum used to sit with her head in her hands thinking, today is the cellar day. And then we were all happy again for a while because we got a dry cellar for a bit. But I thought it was wonderful having water in the cellar, because if you were lucky, you could get, mind you, we hadn't got a light down there. You'd just got the grid to the front path on the front bricks, hadn't you? But I used to think it was magic having your own paddling pool down the cellar steps, but Mum had never let me paddle in it for some reason. But Chris and I we had to share a bedroom, didn't we, Chris? Janet, being the eldest, got the single bedroom, but she had to come through our bedroom to get to it.
Yeah.
So, of course, if she was on a date any time, you know, and at late night, like coming in at 9:30, and we were already in bed, we had her traipsing through. And then eventually, when Janet got married, it was decided I would have the little bedroom. I don't know why Chris didn't get it, but I got the little bedroom. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven then. I got my own record player and everything in there. I think the whole neighbourhood knew it as well at the time. Oh, yes. Child of the 60s then.
It was wonderful. I remember being 14 and we had this record player. It was like a radiogram, really. A very small portable one. And we had it between Janet and myself. And we had 3 records. And it drove Mum and Dad mad. And I think they wished they'd never bought it. It was Johnny Ray and Cry, I think it was. Nat King Cole, Smile. And I can't remember the third one. But we'd only got the 3 records, so they were on constantly for days after Christmas, after we'd had this radiogram.
Christmases were good, weren't they, Chris?
Oh, yes.
Dad had work right up to late Christmas Eve, being the butcher. I mean, even that run up to Christmas with the shop, he used to have to take orders, and then people that they were stored. Didn't he have them frozen somewhere, and then they all came out for Christmas?
Oh, probably in his cellar at the shop where it was cold.
And I always
we've got a big fridge anyway. Then,
yeah, we got a big fridge, and we were the first people on the village to have a freezer. Do you remember?
Oh yes.
With bird's eye foods in it. And we used to sell bird's eye peas in a freezer in the shop.
I don't remember him selling many other veg.
No,
I think it was just peas.
But I always remember it was mostly Christmas Eve. There was the big family row because Dad had come home exhausted after his very busy last day before Christmas, and we just knew what was coming. Well, where's the meat bill? Where's my piece of pork? Or where's my turkey? Well, Mrs. So-and-so came in last thing and said she'd forgotten to order it. So we've got pork chops for tomorrow. And there was the biggest row going because we rarely ended up with a joint or the turkey that Mum had wanted. So it got to the point where, in the end, in the latter days, Mum would go down to Cheadle's in Newcastle and order her Christmas meat from down there to guarantee we got turkey on the table for Christmas Day. But happy days. That we sorted it by Christmas morning. And Mum would always have a big log fire burning, wouldn't she? Oh, and the front room by this time, which when I was a very little girl, had been a closed down shop. Dad had had his own shop before the war, hadn't he?
Yes.
Where we lived. Grandad had got the shop lower down.
Yeah.
But during the war, Dad became a Bevan boy and closed our shop and went, when he wasn't in the pit, went and worked with Grandad down the road at his shop. So when, after the war, they never opened the shop in our house again. So eventually, Mum persuaded Dad to get it converted into a living room and a hallway. And we had a hallway with a telephone in it because Mum was a district nurse, so she had to be on the telephone by this time. We're talking about the 50s and 60s now.
No. In the 40s we had a telephone.
Oh, I know you had the phone then. I mean the hall.
Yeah.
It was
1954 we actually had the conversion.
Oh, was it? Mm. And we had a bathroom.
A bathroom at the same time.
Because up to then it was tin bath on the hearth. And the toilet at the very top of the yard, which was terrifying for me, absolutely terrifying. And of course we had the gazundas during the night, if necessary, being little kids. But we had the conversion done, and we had this very smart front room put in, which we thought was lovely. But we never sat in it. I mean, we only
did
ever
at
went in it at Christmas.
Christmas, and occasionally if we got visitors coming.
Or Charity Sunday.
Charity Sunday
Might
could
have had
be
it
used.
set up for Charity Sunday, and you were allowed to sit in it.
Can you tell me more about Charity Sunday?
Charity Sunday. Are you doing this talk
Well,
now?
Charity Sunday,
Got your sugar bun.
yes. Charity Sunday always started a few weeks before, probably beginning of April, where we did what we called the practice. We used to have to go to Sunday school,
Charity
practice, and start to learn the songs that we were going to sing on the big day. I love that time because it had just become, the clock had just changed and it was light nights, and we could have a little play out with all the children from Sunday school before we actually went in. And then we had to behave, of course, sit quiet. Anyway, the run up to the practices and the week before the charity, the stage, we sat on a stage.
It was built over the altar.
Yes, built
area.
over, the pulpit it
And
was
the
built
pulpit.
over. And it was sort of wooden slats, but the men had to come and put the stage up on the Monday before the Sunday, and then we'd have 2 practices on the stage. And as you got a year older, you went on the next rung up.
A tier higher. Yeah, you did.
Until you were about 16, I think, and then I think you felt you were a bit too old then. That was lovely because you all had, well, I think most people had new clothes, even if they didn't have a lot of clothes in the year. Parents saved or had them made because it was just after the war when I was small, and Mrs. Whittaker used to make Janet and my clothes.
Mrs. Amphlett made mine.
Mrs. Amphlett, yes, she did yours.
In Kinsey Street.
And on the big day itself, you'd get up early. You wouldn't be able to get dressed until you'd had your breakfast, and then you put your smart outdoor clothes on, your new ones. Off you'd have to go. I think we went for about 9 o'clock. And also the choir, the chapel choir, would be singing. So alternate years, the choir would go to one end of the village and the children would start at the other, and then you'd meet up in because we went to the Bethel Methodist,
Middle
and it
of
was
the
more or
village,
less
really.
middle of the village.
Yeah.
And you would stop and sing. Oh, we always had the Salvation Army band, which got everybody out of the beds, I think, and they were playing. But in those days, people wanted to see the charity, so they came out
on the doorsteps.
on the doorsteps.
Yeah.
And we'd got relatives in Abbey Street, so you went down the entries of Abbey Street to say hello to these elderly aunts and uncles, and you come back with probably a sixpence or something like that.
I can't remember that. Nobody ever gave me a sixpence.
Well, I do.
Flipping heck.
And then eventually you would start getting tired, but the Bethel Church always stopped at the Crown Inn at Crown Bank, and the landlord, I'm trying to think what his name was, used to bring a chair out or a stool, and the visiting minister who'd meet with you there would stand on this stool and give a sermon. And that, really, as little kids, we didn't want that. But we had to stand there, probably shuffling our feet and perhaps not behaving very well. Waiting. What were we waiting for, Cheryl?
What, the sugar bun?
Yeah, the
Did
sugar.
we have the sugar bun there?
No, we went back. We were waiting
Oh, I
for him
see what
to
you mean.
finish.
Oh, well, that was
so
the
we
highlight.
went back. I mean, the Crown and the Bethel weren't too far away, so we'd walk back to the Bethel, and there we would have.
Oh, and that was the highlight. That was the one thing that I could not wait for on Charity Sunday, was to do the trek all around. I enjoyed the singing and all
Oh,
that.
yes, I loved
But to
it.
get back to chapel for the sugar bun was the best thing ever. And I suppose when you think back, Chris, we didn't have that sort of thing very often, did we?
No,
I mean,
we didn't.
Right? And it was the biggest treat in the world. It was as good as Christmas to me, that was.
Yeah.
And finding a tangerine down my dad's sock on Christmas morning with a few bits and pieces thrown in. to me, the sugar bun was on a par.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
I think they were actually made at Bird's Bakery. I'm sure
would
everybody
be,
would tell you
round
that.
the backs.
Not far from our chapel.
We'd have to ask David about that one because he worked for Bird's
Yeah.
Bakery.
And I imagine Birds did this for all the other churches and Sunday schools.
Oh, sure they did.
So they probably
Yeah.
did very well out of it at the end of the year.
And then after that, after the sugar bun, we'd go back then home for lunch, and then get ready for the afternoon performance.
Yeah.
And put on a different outfit of the posh frock that we'd
Oh,
probably
the frock.
had made for us, and sit as good as gold like little angels on that stage. And family would come then, wouldn't they?
Yes,
From afar.
We would always have mum's sisters or relatives from Old Sage who would come on the train to Silverdale.
Or Stone.
From Stone to Silverdale or Old Sage.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hard going for mum because she would be getting a hot meal for all these people as well as us kids. And as Cheryl says, we'd have to then have a wash, put the posh frock on and off again. But it was lovely. It was that feeling lovely.
It was magic.
And I believe, from what a lot of people say, a lot of the girls had 2 frocks or 2 dresses.
I can't remember having 2.
Oh yes, I've heard them say, and I thought, well, we only ever had the one.
We did.
We only ever had the one.
And then we'd come home after the performance, afternoon do, and then Mum would do a big tea for everybody.
A salad tea,
A
wouldn't
big
it?
salad tea, and we all had to sit round the table. And then we'd be off again for the 6 o'clock performance at the evening service. And then they'd come home and all have drinks and things before setting off back to All Sage or Stone.
Yeah.
It was a hard day.
And then when you
think
got
about
to
it.
bed, it was rather sad. It was
all over.
Done with for another year.
A bit like Christmas, really.
Oh yes.
It was just the same at Christmas. We'd have, I think we'd have a breakfast, wouldn't we, Chris? Did we have breakfast?
Oh yes. We
'Cause
always
everybody
had
had breakfast.
baked oat cakes.
Yeah.
Baked oat cakes.
And then there was whatever meat we were allowed to have for Christmas lunch. And then you'd all have to sit down again at tea time round the table, the posh table that had been pulled out to its extent. And we'd all have the big salad tea again, wouldn't we? But I always remember Christmas lunch. We'd sit there with whatever and the trimmings, and Dad would always sit there and say, well, it's as far away as ever. At 12 o'clock on the dot, as soon as we'd sat down to eat our dinners. It's as far away as ever. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
Well, I
was
think in
nearly
latter
over.
years we used to laugh.
We used to laugh, but at that age, when I was about 5 or 6, I'd think, oh, it's over. But it wasn't really.
No.
But I suppose that's the way. My dad had always got a cup half empty, hadn't he?
I don't know. We liked to laugh.
He did like
He was quite comical.
He did like a laugh. But that's how it was. And then the other big joyous moment of the year was the Sunday school outing.
Oh yes.
I mean, that came after the charity towards the end. Was it Whit Sunday?
It was
the
May.
end-
It was
the end
always
of May.
May. But I do remember one occasion, and I always remember this. The sun was shining. I've forgotten where we were going. It'd probably be Rill or London.
It was always
somewhere. And we stood, and we stood, and we were all getting upset. And eventually, they found to say the bus had either broken down or it had forgotten us, and we couldn't go that day. Oh, we were heartbroken. But because we got a picnics, lots of us went to play over the jollies and had the picnic over in the jollies.
And played games.
Well,
I can't remember that, you see.
well, nobody organised it. I mean, all the children went home, but as you know, we were quite a group in Church Street and Chapel Street, so we all went over to the jollies. But then we got another week to look forward to the trip again.
Oh, did we? Oh, I can't remember that one.
Yeah.
But I thought it was magic going to Rill. I mean, Rill was just Mecca.
Well, as a children,
We didn't know any other,
Rill
did we?
and Blackpool were the holiday places.
Destinations. Yeah.
That we went to.
And then we'd sing. Oh, and we had an uncle who was actually a professional footballer. He played for Stoke at the time, and he got a ukulele, and he'd come on the Sundays.
On the choir outings.
That was the choir outings, which was perhaps a few weeks later. And we'd go on the choir outings, and Uncle Arthur would play the banjo on the way back. And we'd sing and sing and sing all the way back, wouldn't we?
But there'd always be two coaches going, and the coach that hadn't got our uncle on felt peeved because they hadn't had this. So what he did, coming back, we stopped the coaches halfway home, and he would transfer himself to the other coach,
and they'd get the sing-song.
Sing-song.
Happy days, so sad.
And he would make the songs up on
Oh,
wallpaper.
yes.
And
Oh,
hold
yeah.
the wallpaper
Hold
for
the
every, or
words
somebody would, so they could sing the words.
And it was usually about the characters on the bus.
Oh yeah.
He'd make the songs up and mention the names of people on the coach.
Yeah.
And we would just howl with laughter, wouldn't we? I can remember that very clearly. Happy days. And then the other thing we did in the summers, after chapel, evening service, Sunday nights, a group of them, and I'd just tag along because I was only about 5 or 6, we'd go for a walk. And we could end up going to Leasit or round Keele.
Yes.
And back down the road.
And also, we used to go up the side of the pit, up by the slag heap. I think it may have been called Nab's Lane. I may be wrong there, but it was quite steep. This is when I was a small child. If it was a nice night, and it'd be mum and dad and my auntie, my granddad and my grandma, who was an invalid, in a wheelchair, and we would have to try and push that wheelchair up to High Lane.
Up the side of a slag
Yeah,
heap.
and we did that, and that was really the only time I ever got close to the pit. From our house, you could see the slag heap. It was very close. And it was just part and parcel of how we lived. It was there. And we loved to see it burning at the top. But we never really went into
Too
the pit,
close to it.
too
No,
close
no.
to the pit. I suppose the closest we ever did was going on the trains at the station,
Yes.
because that was right by the colliery.
Yeah.
So
And I used to love. I was proud of the slag heap. I thought it was a real mountain, and that we got a mountain in our valley, coming out of our valley. And when it snowed in the winter, it was magical. It was a different thing to look at, wasn't it? Yeah. And I just thought it was wonderful to open our curtains in our back bedroom and see my Mount Etna standing there. And it was steaming, just like Mount Etna, although I didn't know what Mount Etna was at the time. But I was proud of that slag heap. But then I remember another time when I was at St Luke's School, and I think you and Janet must have taken me to school, because I can't ever remember Mum taking me to school. And I was a bit envious of the kids who always had a mum at the school gate at the end of the day. And I'd got 2 sisters who didn't really want me anyway, dragging me back home again down Church Street. But I always remember once playing in the playground and suddenly looking up, and Mum was standing at the gate. Do you remember the gate opposite in Sneed Terrace gate?
Yeah, yes.
Not the one on Church Street gate, but the gate in Sneed Terrace. And she was standing there, and I ran over, and she told me she'd been to the colliery for an interview for a job as the colliery nurse, and that she was just on her way back. I didn't know what an interview was at the time, but it was something to do with the colliery in my mind. But evidently she mustn't have got the job, because she never worked at the pit. But she did work on the village, I know she couldn't ride a bike. Mum could not, as I couldn't, because I was never allowed a bike, because when I was born and brought up in the early 50s, the roads were too busy for bikes for me. Can you believe it? The roads were too busy, so you can't have a bike, but the other 2 got a bike. But Mum couldn't and never had one. But she did all her district nursing on foot or on the bus, because she covered Nutton as well.
On
So-
Chesterton.
And Chesterton. So, I mean, Nutton she might have walked either over Jolly's or up Nutton Bank to get to.
Dad used to walk up this path by the side of the slag heap.
Oh,
which I
did she
think
go
was
that
Babs
way
Lane.
as well?
Yes, she would.
All right, I didn't know that.
And she did have a bike. A bike was delivered.
Oh, right.
And I remember one Sunday afternoon, Dad holding the saddle, trying to get it round the backyard to get on this bike, and she just couldn't take to it. But the yard wasn't that big anyway.
Wasn't. She'd have been better in
On the
that busy main road in 1948. But she did it all by foot and bus,
Until
didn't she,
about
Chris?
1954, when she had a car.
And that was a magic moment, because I was at. Are you sure it was that early?
Or 54 to 56. And I was...
I thought, anyway, I remember coming up Chapel Street this particular day, and there was this dark bottle green Ford Popular parked on our front. And I thought we just got visitors, and went in to discover that it was our car, and Mum was having driving lessons off Mr. Hatchell. Do you remember Mr. Hatchell?
Yeah.
Taught us all to drive. And but in those days, it was around the Suez Crisis, Chris.
It was, so it was 56. It was
Because
1956.
you were allowed to drive on your own. It wasn't just petrol rationing. You were allowed to drive as a learner on your own.
Yes.
And so Mum was learning to drive on her own in this car, as well as doing her work. And I always remember one day she came in, and for some reason she'd been down Whitmer Lane to go to Whitmore, and had driven straight into a pond halfway down. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but also when you got Pophouse Corner in Keele, she
Yeah.
was coming from Keele, and she scraped all the side of the
Yes,
car
I always
on
remember
that house.
for years we
Everybody scraped their car on
saw
that,
on that house, on the pop
It was
house.
so narrow.
And for years we saw Mum's green paint up that wall every time we went to Keele, didn't we? And my dad always pointed it out. There's the green paint off our car on that wall. But I always remember Mum coming in saying that she'd run into a pond on the way to Whitmore, and she'd had to go to the farmer across the road and get his tractor to pull her out. But then Mum went for a driving test eventually, and passed first time, amazingly, and then admitted that she'd gone in a nurse's uniform,
And that helped.
which she thought was a little aid, and she'd reversed. She'd done her reversing. I see it now. I drive past it and walk past it. It's on the Highland, a little lane that she was asked to reverse into, and she also ran the car up that wall on her driving test. And all he said to her was, "You'll have some explaining to do when you get home." And he still passed her, which was amazing. So when I came to do my driving test, I decided it was a good idea to put my nurse's uniform on. And I passed first time, funnily enough, but I didn't run the car up a wall. And I did do my driving test in the snow on the 23rd of December, so I think I did exceptionally well, really. But that car was a godsend. My dad then learned to drive after, and he was a bit erratic, wasn't he, Dad,
Oh, yes.
in a car?
Yes.
But he loved the car, and every Sunday, you were growing up. I mean, 7 years older than me.
Yeah.
You'd left the nest nearly then, but every Sunday I had to be shoved into the back of that Ford Pop and taken everywhere, and we'd proper Sunday driving.
Oh, yes. Slow.
Slow, quick, slow. And we went everywhere. And we even went to places like Llangollen. I mean, I couldn't believe it. We did see the world a bit then, didn't we?
When we
Well,
got the
we did.
Ford
I
Pop.
did. I don't know about you. But that car was just wonderful.
And he had a cine camera, so he'd take that with him. And when you were, watching the films back again, they were more upside down, weren't they?
Oh, it was
Fields
always dropping
and
the
gates
camera.
and things were everywhere. They never
Always-
seemed to point it the right
Always
direction.
dropping the camera while he was using it somehow. And there was always a cigarette sticking out of his mouth, wasn't there, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Dad was a butcher on the village. And, I mean, when you think of
Health and
standards
safety.
now, there was, you go into Dad's shop and there was always a cigarette on the chopping block,
Standing up
standing up,
on the
smoking away, burning away. Either that or it was always between his lips. He never not got a woodbine on the go, had he? Always, and it's got to be woodbines. And do you remember Mum used to have the occasional passing cloud?
Oh, yes. She'd get them for us for Christmas.
Which
the
was-
passing clouds.
She'd get them for us for
I
Christmas.
don't know they were passing cloud. They were the coloured ones, the cocktail ones.
Oh, well, the passing cloud were the ones that were flat, that were oval,
yes.
weren't they? As if you'd sat on the packet first.
Yeah.
And they were posh at Christmas. And then we had she'd put the coloured ones in little glasses on the tables around with the gold stub end.
That was it.
And, that was just accepted. That was just perfectly accepted.
Yeah.
Along with the egg flip, you've got Christmas, you've got the coloured cigarettes in a little glass on the table. And that was the bee's knees. And when you think back, oh dear.
Mum never smoked though, did she?
Well, she had I did see her with the occasional
Only
one
on a photograph I ever saw it. Was
at Christmas.
when she was in her teens or 20s.
Yeah. But that's the way it was. And